The village of Ayetoro was invisible. Not because it didn't exist, but because no one cared enough to see it. Hidden behind thick forests, cut off from the world, Ayetoro was nothing more than a cluster of mud houses and forgotten dreams. No roads, no electricity, no future anyone could point to, just survival. Children ran barefoot on dusty paths, their laughter echoing through emptiness. Women walked miles under the burning sun just to fetch water. Men returned from farms each day, not with abundance, but with just enough. Hope wasn't something they had. It was something they imagined. Then one day, everything changed. The white men came. Strange vehicles rolled into the village, machines the people had never seen before. Dust rose into the air like a silent warning. They spoke a language no one understood, wore helmets, carried strange equipment, and most importantly, they kept pointing at the ground, like they were searching for something hidden beneath the soil, or something the village was never meant to find. The elders welcomed them, not out of trust, but out of desperation. Because when you've been forgotten long enough, even strangers begin to look like salvation. Days turned into weeks. The strangers dug deeper into the earth. They marked lands, built camps at the edge of the forest, and slowly, Ayetoro began to change. The white men started offering gifts, money, food, promises of schools, hospitals, roads, a better life. For the first time, hope felt real. Pause. Music softens, then drops. Then one evening, it happened. A loud, violent rumble tore through the village. The ground shook. Children screamed. Women ran in panic. Men grabbed their tools, ready to defend the only thing they had left. For a moment, it felt like the earth itself was angry. But when the dust settled, the white men were smiling. They had found it. Something buried deep beneath Ayetoro. Something valuable. Something powerful enough to change everything. No one in the village understood what it was, but the elders did, or at least they understood enough. That night, under the cover of darkness, a meeting was held. No children,
We are in agreement,
no
then.
women,
Yes.
just
Let us
elders
sign the
and
papers.
strangers. And by morning, a decision had been made. Music turns emotional, haunting. Weeks passed. Then the machines grew louder. The digging became aggressive. The forest began to disappear. Water sources turned dark. The air changed. The elders, once humble custodians of tradition, became gatekeepers of wealth. Contracts were signed in secret. Deals were made in silence, and money meant for the people vanished into hidden accounts. At first, the villagers didn't notice. After all, change had come so quickly. New roads, electricity, occasional gifts from the elders, bags of rice, small cash handouts, promises of more. It was enough to keep hope alive, but not enough to hide the truth forever. Slow fade into suspicion. Weeks turned into months. The foreigners kept extracting resources from the land. Truck after truck left Ayetoro, loaded with wealth. Yet the farmers still struggled to feed their families. The fishermen still returned with empty nets. And the village school? Still a crumbling building with no roof. Whispers began to spread. Where's the money going? But whispers are dangerous in a place ruled by fear, so most people stayed silent. Most, but not all. Only one family stood against it. The Adekola family, educated, respected, feared. Their compound stood not as the richest, but as the most dignified. Books filled their home. Conversations carried meaning. Their children spoke with confidence that made others uncomfortable. And at the center of it all, was Tunde Adekola. He had returned from the city with more than just education. He came back with clarity, with purpose, with a fire the village had never seen before. Tunde walked through Ayetoro with observant eyes. He saw the new wealth, but also the hidden suffering. He saw elders growing fatter, while children grew thinner. He saw silence, where there should have been questions. And so, he became the question no one wanted to answer. One afternoon, under the scorching sun, Tunde stood in the village square. Men gathered, women paused. Even children stopped to listen. His voice was calm, but carried weight. This wealth belongs to the village, not a few greedy hands. A murmur spread across the crowd. Some nodded. Others looked around nervously. No one had ever spoken like this before. Not openly, not boldly, from a distance. The elders watched, their faces unreadable, but their silence, it was louder than anger, because Tunde had done something dangerous. He had planted a seed, and seeds grow. That evening, conversations changed in Ayetoro. Families spoke in hushed tones. What if he's right? What if we've been cheated? The people were beginning to think, and that alone was a threat. The elders felt it, their control slipping, not because of force, but because of truth, and truth spreads faster than fear. So they did what men in power often do when threatened. They began to rewrite the story. Rumors appeared overnight. Tunde is arrogant. He wants to take the wealth for himself. He has been influenced by outsiders. The same villagers who once admired him began to doubt. Not all, but enough. Still, Tunde did not stop. He visited homes, spoke to farmers, listened to fishermen. He reminded them of what Ayetoro used to be and what it could become. A village where wealth was shared, where children went to proper schools, where no one was left behind. And slowly, the people began to believe again. But belief comes with a cost, because the more the villagers listened, the more the elders began to hate. Not just Tunde, but everything he represented, his education, his confidence, his family, everything they could never be. That night, the elders gathered in secret. No celebration, no laughter, just anger, cold, focused, dangerous. He is poisoning the minds of the people, one elder said. If we let this continue, we lose everything, another replied. A long silence followed. Then, the oldest among them spoke. Then we don't argue with him. Another pause. We end him. And just like that, the fate of the Adekola family was sealed. Not by strangers, not by outsiders, but by the very men sworn to protect the village. Back in his home, Tunde sat with his family, unaware of the storm gathering around them, unaware that truth had made him a target, unaware. That betrayal had already begun. In Ayetoro, the greatest enemy wasn't poverty. It was the people you trusted the most. Tunde Adekola had become a problem, not because he was loud, but because he was right. He asked questions no one dared to ask. Where did the development funds go? Why are our schools still broken? Why are our people still suffering? And worst of all, he had proof. But Tunde was not alone. His family stood like a wall behind him. His sister, Bimpe, a sharp, fearless lawyer who knew how to dismantle lies in a courtroom. His younger sister, Sola, a journalist whose words could ignite truth like wildfire. Together, they were dangerous, educated, respected, unafraid, everything the elders' children were not. At first, it was quiet resentment. Side glances at village meetings, murmurs behind closed doors. Too proud, too educated. They think they are better than us. But resentment slowly transformed into hatred, because every time Tunde spoke, the people listened. Farmers began to question. Women began to demand answers. Even the youth, once silent, started to rise. And that terrified the elders. "He's turning them against us," one elder hissed. "No," another replied, gripping his staff tightly. "He's opening their eyes." That was worse. So they made a decision that night. A decision that would change everything. "If truth is his weapon," the oldest among them said slowly, "then we will make him the villain." Days later, the rumors began. Soft at first. "Tunde has been collecting money from outsiders. He wants to sell the village land. He is not who he claims to be." Lies, carefully planted,
If Tunde
strategically
returns,
spread.
everything is lost.
At the market, women whispered. At the farms, men shook their heads. Even friends began to keep their distance. Truth was losing its voice, and lies were getting louder. Sola noticed it first. "They're poisoning the people," he said, pacing angrily. Bimpi's eyes narrowed. "This isn't random," she replied. "This is organized." Tunde said nothing. He just watched, listened, waited, because he understood something they didn't yet realize. This was no longer just a fight for truth. It was a war of perception. Then came the breaking point. One evening, as Tunde returned home, he found a crowd waiting, not to greet him, but to accuse him. "You betrayed us! You sold us out. Leave this village." Voices he once trusted, now turned against him. Bimpi stepped forward, furious. "Where is your proof?" she demanded. But the crowd didn't want proof. They wanted someone to blame. And in that moment, Tunde understood. The elders had succeeded, not by destroying him, but by turning his own people against him. That night, the Adekola family sat in silence. The air was heavy. The betrayal was deeper than they imagined. Sola clenched his fists. "We fight back," he said. Bimpi nodded. "We expose them." But Tunde finally spoke, calm, controlled. "No," he said. They both looked at him, confused. "No?" Bimpa asked. Tunde leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "They want a war," he said quietly. "Let's give them something worse. A revelation. Because sometimes the most dangerous response to betrayal is not revenge. It's the truth, revealed at the perfect time." The village of Ayatoro went quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the dangerous kind. Doors closed earlier than usual. Conversations dropped to whispers. Even the wind seemed to move with caution, as if it too had seen what happened to the Adekola family. No one mentioned Tunde's name. No one asked about Sola. And Bimpe? Her trial was swift and suspicious. Evidence appeared from nowhere. Witnesses spoke like puppets reading from the same script. Within days, she was convicted, her voice buried beneath lies carefully planted by the elders. The message was clear: speak against us and vanish. And so, the people obeyed. But not everything was dead miles away from Ayatoro. In a dimly lit cell, Tunde sat in silence, bruised, weakened, but not broken. They had taken everything from him: his freedom, his family, his name. But they made one mistake. They left him alive. A guard approached his cell that night, his footsteps hesitant. "You shouldn't be here," the man muttered under his breath. Tunde looked up slowly, eyes sharp despite the darkness. "Then help me get out." The guard hesitated, then quietly, "They killed your father." A pause. Tunde already knew. But hearing it, made something shift inside him. Not grief, not pain, something colder, something patient. The truth they buried back in Ayatoro, the elders celebrated. Their greatest threat was gone, or so they believed. What they didn't know was that Sola was alive, hidden, watching. The journalist had seen it all unfold, the arrests, the lies, the fear. And before they came for him, he ran, not out of fear, but strategy. From a nearby town, Sola began to write. Names, dates, transactions, every secret deal the elders thought was buried. He dug up. Every lie, documented, every betrayal, recorded. The story they tried to silence was becoming a weapon. The beginning of return. Weeks passed. Then one night, a prison door quietly creaked open. No alarms, no noise, just a whisper. Go. Tundi didn't ask questions. He stepped into the darkness and disappeared into it. Not as a victim, but as something far more dangerous. They ended a family, but what they created was a reckoning, because betrayal does not end a story. It begins one, and in Ayatoro. The silence was about to break. The air in Ayatoro changed the moment her heels touched the dusty ground. No one spoke, but everyone watched. Bimpe Adekola didn't look like the woman they buried in scandal years ago. No fear in her eyes, no desperation in her steps. Only control, calculated, precise. The black SUV door shut behind her like a warning. She adjusted her sunglasses slowly, scanning the village like a hunter returning to familiar territory. And then, she smiled. Not warmth, not kindness, recognition. Words spread like wildfire. Bimpi is back. The same one they accused? The lawyer? No, not the same. This one is different. Even the elders heard. And for the first time in years, they were uneasy. That night, the elders gathered again in the same dimly lit room where they had once planned the destruction of the Adekola family. But the confidence they once carried was gone. She should not be here, one muttered. We ended that family, another said, though his voice trembled. A third elder leaned forward, sweat lining his forehead. Then why does it feel like it's just beginning? Silence. Heavy, suffocating. Because deep down, they knew the truth. They didn't destroy the Adekolas. They scattered them. Meanwhile, Bimpi sat alone in a newly built house at the edge of the village. Not in hiding, in position. Files were spread across her table. Documents, land records, transaction receipts, names. Every secret the elders buried. She had unearthed. Every lie they told, she had documented, and every betrayal. Her fingers brushed over it gently. Her voice was barely a whisper. They thought silence meant weakness. Her eyes hardened. They were wrong. The next morning, the village woke to something unusual. Government vehicles, officials, uniformed officers. No warning, no announcement. Just action. The elders rushed out of their homes, confusion turning quickly into panic as papers were waved in their faces. Fraud, embezzlement, illegal land acquisition. Years of hidden crimes, exposed in minutes. How is this possible? One elder shouted. And then, they saw her, standing at a distance, calm, watching, Bimpi. One of the elders staggered forward, his voice breaking. You did this? She didn't move closer, didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. I didn't do anything, she said softly. I only told the truth. As they were led away, the same people they once ruled over stood and watched. No cheers, no protests, just silence. The same silence the elders had once used as a weapon, now turned against them. That evening, Bimpe stood alone again. the sun setting over Ayatoro. For a moment she allowed herself to feel it. Not victory, not joy, justice, but incomplete, because one question still remained. Sola, her sister, the one who disappeared, the one whose fate was never explained. Her jaw tightened slightly. This was never just about revenge. It was about answers. She turned back toward the house, toward the files, toward the war that wasn't over yet. Because if the elders thought their downfall was the end, they were wrong. This was only the beginning. The night was too quiet for a village like Ayatoro, once full of life, now buried under silence and fear. The elders thought the Adekola siblings were gone, erased like footprints in Harmattan dust. But they were wrong. In a dim mud house at the edge of the village, a single flame flickered. Sola Adekola sat alone, writing, fast, urgent, every word, defiance, every sentence, a fight against the lies that had taken over Ayatoro. "They will know the truth," she whispered. A soft creak, footsteps. She turned. Tunda stood in the doorway, stronger, hardened, alive. For a moment, silence said everything. "You didn't stop writing," he said. "I couldn't," Sola replied. Then another figure stepped in, Bimpa, calm, controlled, unshaken. "They tried to erase us," she said quietly. "But we are not a story they can rewrite." Now they stood together. Not victims, not fugitives, but something more dangerous, truth-bearers. Sola closed her notebook. "This is everything they tried to bury." Bimpy nodded. "Then we show the village." Tunda stepped forward. "No more hiding." The flame flickered harder. 3 siblings, reunited, bound not just by blood, but by purpose. And in that moment, Ayatoro's silence began to break. The sun no longer set on a village of shadows, but on a city of amber light. Ayatoro had shed its skin of dust and desperation, breathing deep the air of a promise kept. The architect of peace, Adekola, did not sit on a throne of gold. He sat on the porches of the elders and the doorsteps of the youth. He understood that a legend isn't built on statues, but on the steady rhythm of a functioning community. Under his guidance, the Ayatoro Collective was formed. The wealth that once sat stagnant in the coffers of the corrupt began to flow like the river during the rainy season. It flowed into the Great Academy, where children learned not just history, but how to write the future. The Healing Center, where the white-coated doctors worked alongside herbalists, blending tradition with modern medicine. The irrigation grid, turning the parched outskirts into a belt of green that fed 3 neighboring provinces. The weight of the legend. But becoming a legend has a price. Adekola's hair turned the color of the moonlight, and the lines on his face were a map of every struggle the people had endured. One evening, as the drums of the new harvest festival echoed through the streets, a young girl approached him. She held a slate from the new school. "Baba," she whispered, "they say you moved mountains to build this." Adekola laughed, a soft sound like dry leaves. "No, little one, I only pointed to the shovels. The people moved the mountains. I just reminded them that they were strong enough to do it." The final transition years passed, and Ayatoro became a beacon, a model of what happens when greed is replaced by grace. The sequence of the town's evolution was now complete. It was no longer Adekola's village. It was simply the home of joy. When the time finally came for Adekola to rest, he didn't leave behind a monument of stone. He left behind a generation of leaders who didn't need a legend to tell them what was right. As the first light of a new decade hit the town square, the people gathered. They didn't mourn. They looked at the schools, the hospitals, and the shared prosperity around them. They realized that while the man was gone, the new dawn was no longer a moment in time. It was their way of life. Ayatoro had changed for the last time. It had become exactly what it was always meant to be. They tried to bury the truth, but they forgot. Truth grows roots, and roots break kingdoms.